it's not working for the people that need the care, you know, and that's a problem.
There's also been a lot of scandals around the nation at various VA regional offices. You may have read the local news about the VA regional office on Houston Street, which deals with all the claims filed by, you know, like local New Yorker vets, and they shredded hundreds of documents. The managers I mean, there was just so much corruption there.
No, we need to get them.
The managers were fired.
Wow.
when it was released to the public.
Was the Houston one?
But imagine if you're on the house. Imagine if you're that vet that Jen was talking about, and the reason you were denied was because your paperwork was shredded.
And that happened when?
In the last year. I don't have the exact date.
So we can put it up on the newspaper.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be on the news.
And there have been reports from, there was a story out in Seattle, and I can't remember when, it was in the last year and a half or so, where you know, case managers were told, just deny people for PTSD, flat out, deny them. So
it was an email that was sent out, but wasn't supposed to be sent out to everyone who it was sent out to, and they tried to deny it, and we're like, well, it's not exactly what we meant, but it basically says, say that people have some other problem. That usually it's like some type of personality disorder because they don't have to pay for that, rather than PTSD. So it's not a problem, but it's not.
But it's not
problem A. It's problem B.
And
requires less money.
For psychological conditions, you're already in the military. You're kind of accustomed to seeing anything psychological as a weakness, right? You know, pain is weakness leaving the body. You're not supposed to have emotional problems or psychological issues. You're supposed to be tough everything out. So, you know, when it's a big deal for a soldier, for a service member to acknowledge to himself or herself, you know what, I have this thing called PTSD, or I have this condition called depression or anxiety, whatever it is. I mean, these are clinical conditions. They're not just, you know, made up. And so it's a big step first to acknowledge that, you know, then to seek treatment from a professional medical care, from a counselor, from a psychiatrist, but then to actually be denied by the VA that you have this condition, it's just devastating. It's devastating. Because they basically tell you that you know, you don't matter, you're making up your condition, you're weak. I mean, there are lots of things that, you know, lots of voices that kind of
problems on top of whatever is already
exactly, on top of everything that you're already suffering.
It's like, where do you recover from that?
Yeah.
I know one of the things that they've been doing, I don't know if they've changed it, but people who I knew who were deployed and came home, when you're coming home, there's like a few days where you're out processing, you're doing your paperwork, you're turning in stuff, and you have evaluations, like mental evaluations, and you basically fill out a form that says, you know, are you experiencing, and it lists different aspects of PTSD or different signs that you may have, negative reactions you may have to what you experienced, and if you say yes to any of them, you have to stay there, whereas like everyone else gets to go home. So there's like 4 or 5 days that you're going to be out processing, and when you're done, you go home, you see your family. You've been away for a year, you want to see your family. So if you say yes to any of these things, you don't get to go home.
Deterrence, so then you just put no to everything.
Yeah, it's like, no, I don't go home. You know,
so then you have to come back.
You're basically forced to lie about it.
Basically.
And the other thing is, when you recently return home, you know, things may not surface right away, right? So maybe, you know, when you're taking these surveys and, you know, you don't even understand your own symptoms yet, right? But then 3 months down the road, 6 months, a year down the road, stuff just comes home to you, you know, like depression, panic attacks, nightmares, all of this type of thing. It happens when it happens, right? So, you know, the VA needs to follow up with veterans, not just like check the box, you know, the first week back.
They give you a window and say, hey guys, after 4 years, anything that happens, at least something.
Yeah.
What about employment? Is there a guarantee? Because if you're looking at lots of 18-year-olds, as a matter of fact, I was listening to a program that says any government agency can come into a school and recruit, and you go, but you cannot just leave school and say you're not going to graduate before, but they can come in and take you. So in a sense, they have a whole lot of rights on you, even in your education. When you go out there and you come back in, do they have activities for you to get involved in? Let's assume you didn't, you just barely had your high school diploma, because most times they promise you that you're going to go to college out there, but you don't.
That's another issue.
They promise you that, but I know it for a fact, because my son went to the Navy, came, made him all, he was at college, made him all this grandiose promise, and I think he was disappointed his first year, but I said to him, yeah, you made your decision, you got to live with it now. But he didn't go to school at all, so then let's assume you don't go. When you come back out now, what are your jobs? Do you get access to employment readily, and is your salary comparable to your contemporaries who did not go in the military?
I mean, there are certain, federal jobs where, if you're a veteran applying for it, you'll be given preference. Anything from, serving in the NYPD to, firefighting and on. But, the government doesn't guarantee you anything. You have to go out and seek it. So.
But even when it seems as if even though you seek it, you're still not getting anywhere.
I mean, one of the reasons that people often join the military again once they get out is they realize that, despite all the difficulties, there at least was that structure. You had the job, you had you were guaranteed health care, dental care,
for the rest of your
shelter,
life.
Housing, all of that. Once you're out, you have to learn how to fend for yourself again, which is a difficult transition. Like, I mean, service members are extremely tough, but without that structure in place, it sometimes can be a challenge. But if you're suffering from conditions and you can't hold down a job, that's a key factor.
It can be different with the National Guard and Reserves because you join and you're doing military service 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer, unless you get deployed and then you're gone for a year. So you generally have a day job. The National Guard is very heavy on the recruiting that they give college money. So a lot of people will join the National Guard, stay home, go to college, get money, and serve while they're in college. I did that, and I started college a little after I got back, about a year after I got back from my training. So there's pluses that they give you. They give you some money for college, you get GI Bill, you get different things. So it's a little bit easier to go to school while you're in the National Guard or the Reserves. Whereas if you join active duty, you have to basically finish your time in, and then you can go to school. They say you can go to school while you're in, but you can take like night classes basically. But if you get deployed, you can't finish the class. And that can happen for National Guard as well. I asked some people, when we got called for 9/11, and people had just started school, that was right after the semester started, and they said we didn't know how long you're going to be gone into New York City, because I was in Buffalo at the time. So people dropped out of classes, and they came back a week later, and the classes wouldn't let them back in. The schools were like, sorry. So at that time, it was very difficult because people obviously knew military existed, but they weren't being used. Not used, but they weren't being accessed, and they weren't being called up regularly. So for National Guard and Reserve, it was very hard at that time because schools were basically disrespecting their status. There are laws around it. When you get deployed, if you're National Guard and Reserve, you're supposed to get your job back when you come home. You're supposed to have the same promotions, pay raises, whatever you would have had you not gone, you're supposed to get. Which, who knows what would have happened while you were there. Some people come home and they won't give them their jobs back and they have to fight it. They'll get them back, but if you come home and your job doesn't want you and you fight to get it back, it may not be someplace you want to stay at. So there can be additional difficulties. The money that you get, I don't know about active duty, but I know with National Guard, it doesn't cover all of school. They say it covers tuition, but when I joined, tuition was a little bit lower. So when I started, I didn't get, I got $3,600 instead of $4,000 for for the year, for the semester. And it only covers tuition, so it doesn't cover like books, housing, all the other things, all the things that make school really expensive.
Right.
Even though I was in the Guard, I was still, because most people join young, especially if they want to go to college on Guard money, they join, right out of high school, which is what I did. I was still in high school when I joined.
That's the Reserve?
National Guard. But yeah, I mean, it's, when you're National Guard, you're like, I'm not Reserve, I'm National Guard. So you join, you're young, you're going to school, so you're still considered dependent on your parents, so you don't get a lot of additional money. They actually use my my GI Bill against me in what they were saying, when they do the financial aid write-up.
Wow.
That was counted as money I was receiving, so I actually was deducted like almost an equal amount, so it ended up like kind of being even in the end, different aspects of it. So it's not like you just get thrown all this money. It's difficult to get the money. Like I went to my unit and I enlisted in the same place that I served. So on one side of the hall, I signed all my papers. Okay, you're going to get this, this, and that. And the other side of the hall, when I started school, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to school. What do I need to fill out?